Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am honored to be here today with my brother Gulwali Jan, who is actually going to be telling us about his journey and how he became an author and what are his motives, what are his aims when he's writing. Over to you. I very much would like you to sort of tell us right from the beginning as to how you came about to become an author.
Thank you, sister. It's great to be with you. So I became an author about 5 years ago. We wrote the book, The Lightless Sky, My Journey to Safety. So basically for the last 8 to 10 years, I've been doing a lot of work around, advocacy and campaigning for refugees' rights, for migration, generally around educations, youth empowerments, poverty, and all sorts of social justice issues. And then in 2015, when I was at university doing my politics degree at Manchester, the opportunity came along to write this book about my journey and my experiences coming to the UK as a child refugee from Afghanistan. And I took the opportunity. I wrote it with the help of a writer, a journalist who helped me put my words on paper. I mean, English isn't my first or second language, so I got a lot of help and support. And we were able to publish it in 2015 at the peak of the refugee crisis. And then since then, subsequently, it's been published in 7 countries in 6 languages. And as a result, I have traveled to about 20 countries, sharing my experiences of growing up in Afghanistan, the childhood I had, why I left Afghanistan, why do Afghans flee Afghanistan in the war zone and the situations around the conflict and the security and so on. And then the journey itself, which took me about a year at the age of 12, 13. And then I talk about the process of being in the UK, climbing asylum, going through the asylum and immigration process in the UK, which took many, many years. And then I explain about my schooling and my education and so on and so forth. So yes, and then, so as I said, I've done about, I visited about 200 countries to do talks and events. I've done about 350 or so talks about my book and experiences in Afghanistan in general, across the UK, and in the US and elsewhere in Europe. So yes, I have been, I would describe myself, I'm a refugee rights campaigner and advocate, but I continue to do activism in other kind of direct actions when it comes to Afghanistan, when it comes to social justice. And so, yes, that's how I became. I think I was doing the work that I'm doing now, I was doing it anyway, but now with the book, it has provided me with a lot of more opportunities and platform and credibility to go out there, to not just speak as a refugee and as a migrant, as an Afghan, whatnot, but speak as somebody, with a book, which really helps. And then I'm able to change the image of Afghanistan in some ways for people, because a lot of people have really negative or bad image of Afghanistan. Some people don't have a positive image. So that's been my work for the last 5-6 years or so.
That is very great to know. It's very interesting that you're mentioning your book as a form of additional help towards your activism, and you yourself using this as a way to promote the image of Afghanistan, which is more or less what many Afghans have been doing for many years, despite all of this activism and all of the different activities that Afghans have been doing throughout the years, now for 42 years nearly. Afghanistan has not seen, peace. Now, in terms of actually your book as a form of activism, as a form of resistance towards what's going on, how would you actually want to sort of, see changes? What do you think we should be doing instead?
Basically, for me, one of the reasons it was important to me, it was important to me to write this book was not because what had happened to me, but I wanted to explain the displacement crisis, because Afghanistan at the time, we had the largest refugee population in the world, and we still have the second and third largest now with what's happening in Syria and elsewhere in the world. I saw there was very little solidarity with Afghanistan and Afghans. I mean, the European Union and America and other countries in the Western world were not only not granting Afghan refugee status, but actually were deporting them, were saying Afghanistan was safe. So I was up against not only to change the broader image of Afghanistan, I have been very fortunate because I've been able to target audiences which normally we don't get into. So I visited many schools in the UK, I go to universities, I go to cities and towns and places where it's very rural, places where perhaps other people might not have access to because there are book clubs or community groups who are doing refugee welcome work, or just like I have been able to work with people from all across aspects of society. So I definitely think this is just one way. We need to do a lot more in terms of, of course, bringing about peace and getting the international community to understand what's happening in Afghanistan. But I have been trying to explain to people that, as a result of the conflict in the war that has been happening, I have been made to be a refugee and to be displaced for the last 13, 14 years. I've not been able to see my family and my loved ones, and there are millions of us. Afghanistan, there's so many Afghans internally displaced in Afghanistan. There are Afghans, we used to have about 5 million or so, even now around that figure, in Pakistan, in Iran, as well as in elsewhere in the world. We have been exiled, and as you were saying, for the last 40 plus years, and this somehow has to come to an end. And a lot of people are actually not aware of what's happening in Afghanistan, because in the news is only being about terrorism and conflict, yes, but then sometimes it's kind of forgotten because it went on for so long. The Afghan conflict, the war went on for the last 20 years now, and then if we count the other 20 years, that's over 40 years. People somehow think there isn't much happening. People doesn't realize that there are still people like us who are affected by the conflict, and that's why we become refugees. That's why there are Afghans across Europe stranded, in wanting to seek asylum and in looking to get to safety and protection.
That is very much in need, to mention about the displacements of many people. Now, let's actually go a tiny bit back in history and sort of talk about your experience as a refugee, as you actually left Afghanistan. May I ask, how old were you when you left Afghanistan?
When I left Afghanistan, I was 12, and the journey took about a year. So I went through 9, 10 countries, and I was in prison. I was treated really badly across, Iran, Turkey, Bulgaria, Greece, almost being, we were rescued at the Mediterranean by the Greek Coast Guards. I mean, there's been stories of people losing their lives. There's been about 20,000 so people have lost their lives in the last 5 years alone in the Mediterranean. And so I had a terrible time in France, in the Calais jungle. And then, making it to the UK was not the end. So the thing that really upsets me is that actually, 13, 14 years later, there are people still making these desperate journeys, and things has not improved. If anything, it could worsen. In the UK, we had a very hostile environment towards refugees and migrants and foreigners, and same in Europe. People are not treated the way they should be treated. And I've been campaigning, for dignity and respecting people's human rights, and granting them, status, and allowing them and welcoming them and creating a culture of welcome. So it has not been easy, but yes, I came here as a child, and it's been a long journey and experience, and physically as well as mentally, it has not been easy. Actually, it's been very, very difficult, not only for me, but for almost all refugees.
You have touched on something which is really crucial here. This is to do with coming as a child, leaving your parents behind, leaving your loved ones behind. May I ask what made you actually wanting to sort of travel as a child, or was it mainly via your own family's desire to send you away?
Basically, I was a child. I didn't really have much choice. I was sent away alongside my brother for own safety, because in 2006, when we left Afghanistan, things were pretty bad. The conflict was kind of restarting, and there was a lot of fighting between the Afghan government, the Taliban, and the US forces. We were kind of sandwiched in the middle. And that's why people have all sorts of reasons when they leave Afghanistan, and Afghans are leaving because of, lack of security and stability and peace and opportunities and so on. And so for us, it was not an easy decision in my family to send us away for safety, for a better future. And in most cases, a lot of cases that Afghans make these difficult experiences and journeys in these decisions so that their kids and their, young people could be away from the war zone. Because a lot of the time you see so many young Afghans losing their lives. We saw just a few days ago, Kabul University was attacked, and we saw the Kabul, there's another education institution were attacked. So we lose young people on a daily, if not weekly basis. And across Afghanistan, we use Afghan security forces. We lose people in suicide bombing, in attacks, and so on. So insecurity is one of the main reasons why Afghans are the second largest refugee population in the world.
Right. You mentioned that you left Afghanistan in 2006, and now we are in 2020. 14 years on, the war is still ongoing. In actual fact, it's since the 1970s that the war has started. But given the fact that so many different countries, international community, and NATO, and various different people are there, yet we're still struggling to find security. And you referred to the Kabul University bombing last week, not last week, even just about 5 days ago. And today or yesterday, another journalist being killed. How does it make you feel?
Heartbreaking to see what's been happening. So the situation in the security situation particularly has actually got worse and not better in the last 14 years. I used to not fear for my life to go back, but now I do. So let's say since 2010, I've been really, fearful of wanting to go back, because before that I thought maybe, things are getting better, I'll be able to go back. Now, it's not only the lack of, we're losing journalists, we're losing academics, we're losing just innocent people, ordinary Afghans. There's issues around, lawlessness, there's corruption, there is kidnapping, there's just so many other social evil in other situations and circumstances where it makes it impossible for people to actually, live there, or to, especially if you're a public figure, especially if you're like, a business person, people who, you're known in the community. So I see a lot of my Afghan friends on social media who are well known, they have securities with them and they're afraid because they could get kidnapped, they could be taken as ransom and so on. So Afghanistan, sadly, with all this, we had 150,000 foreign troops, NATO and ISAF forces in the last, 15 or so years or more. They have not been able to bring us peace and stability, which they promised, and bring us security. So I feel like we Afghans somehow needs to really, decide our own future, and we need to really think about where we are heading. Yes, of course, we can blame Pakistan, Iran, and Russia and US, which is true. They've been involved in the conflict, Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, it's us Afghans who needs to rebuild our country, who needs to let go of our differences and disagreements and move forward to rebuild the nation. So people like me doesn't have to flee for my safety. It's not fair. It's a huge sacrifice. And I see so many young Afghans across Europe. I was recently in Paris and I saw boys as young as 10 who are being separated from their families and loved ones. That needs to stop. It could only stop when there is peace and security, when there is justice. And this conflict had went on for too long, and we have lost over 100,000 Afghan civilians in the last 20 years, and even more so in millions if we count the last 40 years. And somehow this has to come to an end. We can't just continue on this path of destruction. We all, as an Afghan and as human being, have a responsibility to contribute to the peace building effort. Somehow, I don't have all the answers. I mean, what's been happening in Doha, the peace talk, and the work has been happening. The talks have been happening between the Afghan government and the Taliban. It's not looking hopeful, because violence has increased, not decreased. And even now, attack happens and the Taliban says they have not done it. If they have not done it, then what is the point of us talking to them? Because they're not the main threat. The main threat is somebody else. So really, we had to, the Taliban, Daesh, and other groups who have been supported by Pakistan and other regional countries and international countries, they need to stop this support to people. The world needs to treat our blood and our lives the same way they treat their own citizens. We are human beings, and that's one thing I have been struggling to prove to people, that when there's an attack in Afghanistan where 20 university students whom were in their third year policy degree or whatever they were studying, they were murdered in cold blood, and there was very little condemnation, little in the media, in the Western media, about it. And then so we lost 3 people today, and then we've been losing people almost every day. And because it somehow became, we're used to it now. It's normal for us, and it shouldn't be. For me, one life is too many. And, it's tragedy that we have hundreds, thousands of civilians, and every year the casualties are an increase. I was reading a UNICEF Save the Children report a few months ago, where it says every child born in Afghanistan have known nothing but war. And that's heartbreaking. Afghanistan is a very young country. Almost 60-70% people are it's youth, young people, and most of these young people, especially the under 18s, have grown up in a war zone. And so it has a psychological impact on those young people. And again, the youth of Afghanistan wants to move forward, wants to get education, but the enemy of Afghanistan are not allowing us to do, as we saw with the university attack, as we saw with the education center in Western Kabul, which was attacked. I don't know. It can be stopped, but I don't know how.
You have touched on so many other areas that we can actually direct our talk to, but let's talk more about your time in Afghanistan whilst you were still living in Afghanistan, and we'll come back to some of the points you raised whilst mentioning some other aspects which I was going to ask you anyway. Whilst you were in Afghanistan, what was your best memory?
When I was growing up in Afghanistan, I grew up in Nangarhar province in eastern Afghanistan. And the best memory was actually living with my grandparents in the mountains as shepherds. We had a very nomadic life, although my father was a doctor, my uncles were businessmen, and I had a very kind of conservative, traditional Pashtun family. But I really enjoyed being with my grandparents in the mountains when I was age 4 or so for a few years. Especially in summer, we will be in the mountain. In winter, we'll go to warm part of the region. We had goats and sheep, and it was really beautiful. Life was peaceful, quiet, and I learned a great deal about life, about our heritage, our culture, our background, our history from my grandparents, and it was the best time of my life. And sadly, a few years ago, my grandma passed away, and I wasn't there, to hold her hands. And I think, yeah, that's one of the sacrifices that we make when we are forced to flee. We sacrifice so much. There's things that happens once in a lifetime, like a passing away of your loved ones. Or I had my brother and my sisters got married, and I was not there. I mean, I got married here in Europe. My family was not here. That's another subject. But yes, I had a really wonderful childhood until the war started in 2001.
The war was already before 2001 as well.
Sure, but that is the war that I have not remembered, because so when the Taliban was in power, especially in our region, in Nangarhar, it was quite peaceful. That's the time I remember. But my father was part of the Mujahideen, the freedom struggle against the Soviet Union. He would tell us story, and my grandfather would tell us stories that there was, the civil war and the war against the Soviet Union. Yes, there was war when I was growing up as a child. There was war in northern Afghanistan, in certain places in Afghanistan, but our area particularly was quite safe. We had nothing really major happening until 2001. That's my own kind of growing up in my own experience. But yes, I was aware that there was fighting happening elsewhere, because I had an uncle who was a commander in the Taliban, and it was quite common for people to have family members in the Taliban at the time. So yes, for us, it was quite safe and secure.
That is really good to know, that at least you had some years of good memory and some years of peace that you actually really enjoyed in a natural sort of surrounding with your family. And I believe it is the most crucial, the first years are the most crucial years. And I am certain that energy that you actually gained right from the beginning of your life has actually supported you throughout your journey. Now, you left Afghanistan at the age of 12, and you went through different sort of countries. Can you tell me some experiences as you were traveling from Afghanistan and until reaching here in the UK?
Just before I tell you about that, the things, of course, those childhood experiences helped me in my life, and the things that I've learned from my grandparents. My grandma was a midwife, and I used to go with her to people's houses, because we lived in a very remote district. For a woman to give birth, it will take about 3 hours to go to Jalalabad city, and either the mother or the baby will die. And so my grandma was there delivering babies. That was a really, at the time, it was not a great experience. I would have a lot of sleepless nights. I'll be late for school and so on. But it was a really wonderful experience to learn about how humans were giving other humans life, and how my grandmother was able to deliver babies and save lives. It was an amazing experience when I reflect on it now. And things have changed for me. I have seen things as a child that no one should see in terms of the war, and living in constant fear of being killed. When the war started, particularly in our part of the region, the country, it was constant bombing for months and months. And we were terrified. We spent a lot of time hiding in bunkers, which was built during the Russian invasion. So I had then a really terrible time, the few years from 2001 till 2005 and 6. I have seen things that I can't even imagine. I can't even describe and explain the horrors of the war, the fighting, the loss of lives, the things that I have experienced. And so I wish it on no one. So just to say that, war have serious consequences. I lost members of my family in the war, and I saw the indiscriminate killing by American forces as well as by the Taliban in our district, in our villages, and it was absolutely unbelievable. Because at the time, I didn't knew I was a child, but now when I think about it back, it gives me nightmares. Seeing houses burned down, seeing complete family get massacred, especially bombing and rocket attacks and all sorts of things. But anyway, that's the experience I'm sure most Afghans are familiar with. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, because that will just makes me upset and makes me sad. But I just hope for peace and security for Afghans and all people. And just to go back to your question about on the journey, it was a very strange feeling to leave home, to leave family at a kind of a difficult situation where we needed to be there. My brother was a year or two older than me. Our family needed us, and we were kind of running away, but it wasn't our choice. And actually, I understood that it was for our own safety. I didn't knew that it will take me many, many years before I'm able to go back, or I had really no idea how this journey will be. In a way, I was excited, but also nervous. And so the journey began. We were handed over to smugglers and traffickers. It's in the Lightless Sky, it's 120,000 words. I was supposed to be together with my brother, but we were separated by the smugglers in Peshawar, and then I had to travel on my own across to Iran, and from Iran the journey continued to Turkey, and from Turkey to Bulgaria, where we spent some really I spent some time in really inhumane conditions. I was arrested many, many times, in prison, deported, treated quite inhumanely by authorities. We were in the hands and mercy of smugglers. I was looking for my brother, continuing the journey. I didn't have much of a choice. So the experience has definitely aged me. It has made me go from a boy to an adult. It was one of the hellish journey and experiences of my life. And I wish I didn't have to go through it. It was unfortunate that I didn't. Again, the thing that upsets me, I saw deaths on so many occasions on this journey. Going through, I was treated so inhumanely across Europe, and the only place I was welcome was Italy, and that was quite nice. I would have stayed there if it wasn't that, I heard my brother was in the UK, so I was heading to Britain. But everywhere else, somehow it was my fault I was there, and I was seeking safety and protection. It was my fault that my country was a war zone, that, especially Western countries, NATO countries were involved there in the bombing campaign, in the war. There was very little kind of moral and legal obligation on those nations, where everywhere I went, I was unwelcomed across Europe. So it was really sad. And I explained in the Lightless Sky how it wasn't my fault I wasn't born in Europe. Where you're born is an accident of birth. And so that's what I've been doing, trying to raise awareness about the issues and trying to get people to show compassion and solidarity, and to trying to show empathy and sympathy with our situation. And I wanted not just Afghan refugees, but all refugees, but particularly, the issue with Afghans, there is certainly differences in treatment. So it's great the way the Syrian have been treated quite fairly and been welcomed in Europe, which is good. Obviously, they have lost millions of people in the war, but so are us Afghans. There was a report last year by the Crisis Group which say Afghanistan was the most insecure country in the world. And so, but then in Europe, there's a double standard when it comes to the way the European governments in the UK and elsewhere treat Afghans in Afghanistan. It's basically there's very little accountability, and we could be moved around and pushed around without taking they don't take our situations and human rights seriously. And so that has been one of my kind of big concern and campaign, that I want Afghans to be treated as equals. Your nationality should not determine whether you get your immigration status and whether you will be granted refuge, but actually it does. So in Europe, for example, Germany have taken over 1 million Syrian refugees, but the same year deported thousands of Afghans. And same with other countries in Europe, in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Holland, the UK. The UK have never really stopped deportation to Afghanistan. There are lots of Afghans in the UK, almost every towns that I know I have friends in, who are waiting for years for their status. And so definitely the Afghan refugees and Afghan migrants are treated very differently compared to others, which is not fair, which is just it's just wrong and unjust.
Why do you think it is so?
I think the reason the way we are treated differently is because our government has been quite supportive, unfortunately, of the Western policies on deportations and sending Afghans back. There's an agreement called joint way forward with the European Union, which was signed in 2016, 15, if I remember correctly. I went to Brussels. I protested along some of my activist Afghan friends. The Afghan government was literally blackmailed to accepting that the European Union will deport back refused asylum seekers. So that just gives a green light and a kind of a mandate and legitimacy to European state to refuse Afghans. You know, when Afghan comes and claim asylum, which is their human right, like anyone else, usually if they say, oh, I have a problem in Jalalabad or Nangarhar or in Kandahar or whatever, they're like, oh, you should have gone to Bamiyan. Or you should have, why didn't you go to Kabul? Why didn't you go to Mazar-e-Sharif? Why didn't you go to Herat? And people do try to do that. I mean, lots of Afghans are displaced internally, which is over 5 million or so. But somehow the Western government wants to wash their hands of responsibility. They don't want to accept, you know, they've been involved there for around 20 years. They spent billions in Afghanistan. They don't want to admit it has been a failure, in my view. So, and also they just want to not take responsibility for their inaction or action. And because as a result of their policies and their their involvement in Afghanistan, a lot of people have become refugees. I'm not saying it's not the Taliban. Of course, the Taliban and other insurgent groups are equally responsible. But these states who have been fighting in Afghanistan and have been sending troops there, but then unwilling to welcome Afghan refugees. So I have find it also quite difficult to understand why there's a different treatment. In the UK, there's a very high rate. So, for example, a lot of refugees from other parts of the world will get a higher success of acceptance than towards Afghans, even though Afghanistan is the most insecure place in the world. But the UK government says it's safe to send Afghans back. And also there's a contradiction. If we go on the UK Foreign Office website, it will tell British citizens not to travel to Afghanistan. It's literally raid. But then it's okay for Afghans refugees to be deported. And that has been one of my kind of concern. And I have been angry and frustrated, to say the least. And so, a lot of Afghans become destitute. They're exploited. They're working on a very small amount of money in Europe, in the UK to survive because the government doesn't support them. And in some cases, Afghans end up being detained for years and months. And in a lot of other cases, they get deported without without anybody really speaking up for them. And so I would say the Afghan government want to show they're in charge, they're in control, when suddenly they're not. And so the European Union literally told Afghanistan and the Afghan government that you either accept these asylum seekers, or otherwise we will not give you money to support your national security forces. I remember the Deputy Afghan Foreign Minister Karzai said, Hikmat Khalil Karzai told us at the Afghan embassy in London, when I questioned him on this in 2017, I think, he said to us that we were literally faced with questions of, we're giving you aid, we're giving you money to support your security forces. If you don't take in these refugees or failed asylum seekers, we will then spend that money on them here. And I was like, well, it's not this and that. It's not or either supporting Afghans here, or they have an international legal and moral obligation to give people refuge. And so they were just, as I say, so there's been a complicity and incompetence from the Afghan government. And then at the same time, the European Union and the Western world just think, there is nobody who's going to speak on our behalf. In the United Nations, Refugee Agency and others will just basically, not say much. And so the Afghan refugee and displacement crisis and issues has been, is the reason why I do what I do.
Well, so many other questions are there that I can ask, but we will hopefully have another time to talk about various different other aspects. In terms of actually our own duty as human beings, for example, I myself regard myself as a human being to have this responsibility to, voice out people's voices who are not being heard. And as you know, Afghan people are very hospitable, they are very kind, and they actually, don't complain. We don't have got this complaining culture embedded within the way we function. And I hear you, I understand your frustration. And similar, like I am frustrated as to why the Afghan disaster, the issues around Afghanistan are taking this long. And as such, it is our responsibility to raise awareness. And as you know, we are actually working towards establishing an Afghan library, a peace center in the name of Afghanistan and Afghan people, in order to ensure that our voices are consistently going to be projected for the future generations to understand that, yes, we did care, we do care, and we will care. And so therefore, I thank you so much about, your input, your participation, your activism, and please do not give up, because we need people like you. We need more people like you. We need to actually build a huge generation of people who do care, who actually become aware as to what is going on. And we hope that with these sort of discussions and talks that in the future we will have, we will raise more awareness about all the necessary information that Afghan people, young Afghan people, actually understand as to what it takes to leave Afghanistan as a young child. Many were born here, yet unaware as to what sort of complications or problems children in Afghanistan have faced. So your story, and of course your book, is a treasure for all of us. And we will hopefully have you more talking in our panel discussions, which are going to be organized within the next few weeks. And we will also have other sort of talks in regards to various different aspects about Afghan people in Afghanistan. In terms of actually, you mentioned that you were not able to reconnect or see your parents. If we can slowly just move towards your own sort of future intentions. Are you seeing your parents? Have you seen them? When was the last time you saw them?
Before answering the question, I want to say thank you for starting the initiative of Afghan Library in the Peace Center in the Afghan International Academy. I think this is great. That's why we need to raise awareness, get people to have the necessary information about Afghanistan and Afghan issues and challenges that we face. I think that's been kind of lacking. There's been very little kind of resources available in Afghanistan from Afghan themselves. There's a lot of stuff written about us without our participation. So it's great that something is Afghan owned and Afghan led and Afghan, I remember the Afghan peace process, which needs to be Afghan led and Afghan owned. But anyway, so yes, that's great. Thank you. And I'm very happy to support in any way that I can through my work and through my activism, and as well as through participating in contributing to discussion and debate on the issue, particularly the issue of displacement, migrations, and refugees. And to go back to your question about my intention and my aspiration, I haven't seen my family for the last 14 years or so. I love to be able to go back and see them. Things have been difficult because not only because the increase in insecurity, but also legally I'm a refugee. I'm not allowed to go back to Afghanistan yet. Let's see when things becomes a little better. I mean, now we're going through this global pandemic, and I hope we come out of this more compassionate and kind. But at the same time, I hope this will be an opportunity for the peace process in Afghanistan, and the Afghan government, the Afghan people, the Afghan politician and elite will come together and let go of their egos and their self-interest and focus on the interests of the people. So my intention in the future is to definitely go back to Afghanistan, of course, to see my family, but also to live there, to contribute to the rebuilding of the country. I mean, I have my degree was in politics and social science at the University of Manchester. Then I did my master's at Coventry in intercultural dialogue and discussion. And so I learned a great deal about diversity and governance and so on. And I really want to use these experiences and expertise and education and ensuring that we play a fair part in rebuilding Afghanistan and ensuring that young people and children like myself doesn't have to flee and leave the country for safety. And I certainly think, we all have a collective responsibility and duty towards Afghanistan, particularly the Afghan youth who are in the Western world and elsewhere. We really need to go back. And I'm sure most of us would go back and play our part, but actually there hasn't been an opportunity in terms of mainly the security aspects. I mean, and a lot of Afghans will be willing to go and live a life which is not a luxurious life. It's a very simple life, but to be able to rebuild. And there's a lot of Afghans I know who are doctors, engineers, and wants to go back. So my aspiration ultimately is to leave a legacy and to help Afghans in Afghanistan stand on its own feet. And I think it's not just my job, it's the job of every Afghan that we need to go back and rebuild our country.
MashaAllah, thank you. It is really great to have you participating in the Peace Center. And we thank you also to become one of our first ambassadors to promote alongside us peace and the promotion of the positive image of Afghanistan. I thank you sincerely for your time today, and I will hopefully be in touch more in terms of actually the panel discussions which our organization is going to be organizing, and will be sort of trying to sort of put the archive together, so for future generations to read about us, the Afghan diaspora in the UK, for example, that we actually promoted peace right from the first initial, stages of our lives. There's so many Afghans actually doing so much great work, and we aim to sort of bring a united voice together and to show to the world that we do care, we do work together as one unit, as one sort of form of being just an Afghan, just a person from Afghanistan wanting to live in peace, nothing else. If the world would actually allow us, we would actually really wouldn't want to go back and sort of support Afghanistan. But unfortunately, as you rightly said, no one is feeling safe enough to go back. So the security of Afghan people inside Afghanistan is of paramount importance in the next few weeks or few months or years to come, because no Afghan should be killed, no human being should be killed anywhere on the world, in the world or on the world. I mean, we don't even own this world. This is the world of the future generations. And whoever is actually creating all of this nonsense of killing people is not what the young people want. This is not what they want for the future world to live in. I am really very concerned about what the next stage might be. We need to do our part, we are doing our part, but there needs to be more awareness, and we will hopefully have more people who will be joining us on a sort of, more wider basis, and we will raise awareness as much as we can.
That's great what we are doing, what you're doing, and what Afghans does around the world. I think there's a huge potential. I just think we continue needs to be concerned and worry for not only Afghanistan, but across the world. As you rightly said, we don't want anybody being killed. We want people to live in peace. And I just think, we Afghans have suffered and went through a lot of pain for the last many, decades and times. And it's time that peace and security comes to Afghanistan. And again, I hope the world, the international community, our friends join us in this journey towards a peaceful and prosperous Afghanistan. I would love for people of the world to come and visit and see Afghanistan in its beauty. And as we were saying, the hospitality of our people, to experience the warmth and love. We haven't had the chance. I mean, I grew up in a war zone. My grandfather was a refugee. My father was a refugee. And so this cycle of violence and terror needs to end. And it has to somehow end. As we've been saying, I don't know how, but there has to be a solution, a diplomatic and a political solution to this crisis. Every problem have a solution. So yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to speak to you, and I'm sure we will have a lot more conversation. I just encourage people to, particularly young Afghans who are not been to Afghanistan, who are born in the Western world, to read stories of mine and stories like other stories who are written by Afghans from inside Afghanistan to better equip themselves about what's happening, the realities on the ground, and how best they can help and support. Last year, or maybe early this year, we managed to raise over £40,000 for Afghans during, when this COVID-19, we raised £40,000 to help Afghan orphans. And this was done by 10 Afghan societies from universities in London. They just came together and we hosted events, and people donated things, and we had a final event, and we raised this much money literally in a week. So there's been so many examples of Afghan raising money, and the Afghan diaspora plays a really important role in Afghanistan, economy, Afghanistan social structure and culture. And we are the representations, and we are the face of Afghanistan in the Western world, in other countries. So we can do a lot more, not just raising awareness, which is good, but also, raising funds and doing other practical work in supporting academics, supporting people back home. So I have friends who are, doctors, and are helping doctors back home. I have friends who are actually, whenever they're able to go back and offer their expertise in whatever specific field they're in. So we can all, play our part, as I was saying. And let's work together and let's move forward. I hope peace and security comes to Afghanistan, and I hope we can live in peace and security like everyone else.
انشالله بخیر. روز میرسه که راستی واقعا مردم هم زیادتر آگاه میشن و زیادتر متوجه میشن. I thank you sincerely, for accepting our invitation to become part of this initiative, and for being proactive and sort of supporting us right from the initial stages. That as soon as we actually got to know you, you have supported and are still supporting. We will hopefully have more discussions, but for now, I will leave you in peace, and I hope that you will soon see your parents in the most beautiful place that Afghanistan is. And hopefully the world, as you say, could actually come and visit Afghanistan to see what really peace means. Thank you.
تشکر هوهر جان. Nice to talk to you. And ما افغان از جنگ خسته شدیم. خدا کنه که صلح بیا. And so thank you so much. Great to talk to you. Wishing you well and looking forward to catching up with you soon again.
تشکر بازم. خیر ببینین. خداحافظ.